Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Go ahead. The first thing I wanted to do was to just do a quick summary of what do we know about long-term effects of preschool programs. And so at the National Institute, we've done a meta-analysis, which is really just a statistical summary of all of the research that looked at the effects of preschool programs, at least to third grade, since 1960. And just summarize it. So what did all those studies find? And to do that, you have to take scores from all sorts of different kinds of tests and different kinds of measures of social development and put them into a common metric. And that's commonly called an effect size. And it's hard to make sense of that, but one way of thinking about it is that an effect size of 1 is about the size of the achievement gap between black kids or Latino kids and white kids, about the size of the achievement gap between low-income kids and between poor kids and non-poor kids. And so one way of thinking about this is if your preschool program had an effect of 1, it would close the achievement gap at school. Right? And so on average, we see the initial effects of preschool programs 0.7. So what does that mean? It closes about 70% of the achievement gap. Longer term, if we look between ages of 5 to 10 and beyond age 10, 30% of the achievement gap. So when you still hear about fade out. When you hear about fade out is real in the sense that the long-term effects of programs, particularly on disadvantaged kids, are not as great later on as they are initially. And of course, kids are still poor, right? We didn't make them not poor by sending them to preschool. But if you look at that, we've got half the effect there permanently. And from age 5 to 10 and even beyond 10, they don't get smaller. Right? So the idea that somehow they disappear because there's a fade-out effect is just wrong. But you have to have a big enough effect that if your lasting effect is half your initial effect, that's still substantial. Now we also ask, these are just cognitive abilities, we ask the question, of course some programs are more effective than others, what if the program study had the characteristics of the more effective ones? How much of the achievement gap might they close? And the answer is 90% initially, more than half in the first 5 years of school, and permanently about 50%. And so it's not magic. It's not a fix for all of our problems by itself. But 50% of the achievement gap is a pretty big deal. As we look at social and emotional development, now we've got a much smaller number of studies that do that, and the effects on average are much smaller. And I think one reason for that is that there are a lot of programs that don't have any effect on social and emotional development, and some that do. And there's some programs that don't even address that. And that's one of the issues that when you were talking about school readiness, and so that we have programs that you can just focus on academics, right? So, for example, you can just teach kids English and not another language. They'll only learn English. If you have programs that don't do anything about social and emotional development, you won't have any impacts on that. Long-term effects on schooling, grade repetition, special education, graduation. Again, they're relatively small effects. But what's interesting, if you think about it, some of the programs that have the biggest economic returns have had effect sizes long-term on these things of about that size. So that's not too small. Now, we also ask the question, well, one of those things that made a difference about why some programs were more effective than others. And we can really only do this on the cognitive side because that's where we have most of the measures. But if we do that, well, effects are smaller long-term compared to immediate. You've already seen that from the data I showed you. Effects are also smaller in programs that offer comprehensive services. That is absolutely the opposite of what the field thinks, right? But why is, you have to say, so why is that? Are comprehensive services bad for kids? That doesn't make any sense. No, comprehensive services are not bad for kids. But programs that offer comprehensive services, I think, tend to do two things. They lose track of the fact that job one is educating the kids. And they're trying to provide jobs in the community, and they're trying to provide support for parents, and they're trying to solve parents' drug problems, and they're trying to do health and all sorts of other things. And I think they lose track of putting their resources on educating kids first. And second thing is, we don't have that much money in comprehensive services programs. And I think it tends to get spread very thin. And I think one of the risks is if you try to do everything, that you end up not doing anything particularly well. And I think we really have to think about this for early childhood programs, because with healthcare reform, and I don't just mean the new legislation, although that's important, I mean the big strides we've made with the children's health insurance programs in states. There are other people paying attention to health. If you look at the new Head Start Impact Study, kids in the control group get just about the same health services as kids in Head Start. So why is Head Start spending so much time on that if there's somebody else that will do that job when there's nobody else who's going to do the job of educating those kids? And I think we really need to think about what is it that we need to do, not what is it that needs to happen for the child, what is it that we in our programs need to do, and what is it that we need to coordinate with somebody else to make sure it happens. Larger effects with intentional teaching, and that includes direct instruction. Okay? The Perry preschool program that gave birth to the high-scope curriculum, which is commonly thought of as a child-initiated approach, if you actually look at the data on how teachers spent their time, half of the teacher activity was direct instruction. Direct instruction is not bad. Right? And if you then thought about it, we don't let kids learn it's not safe to run into a busy street through discovery. Right? Not a successful long-term solution. Now, does that mean that everything ought to be direct instruction? No. It needs to be balanced. Everything needs to be intentional. It needs to be intentional at the level of, I'm not thinking about how I teach this classroom. I'm thinking about how I teach each child in my classroom. What is it that this child needs right now to make that next step? Whether it's cognitive, social, emotional, doesn't matter. We need to be thinking the same way about all of those. So, and intentional teaching doesn't mean we don't have rich dramatic play. Right? We can do both of those at the same time. Individualization, direct one-on-one interaction with the kids, and small group time. Programs that have those were more effective than those that focused on large group. And higher quality research designs. And I think this is a place where there's a lesson for those of us who worry that research and evaluation will make us look bad. The programs that had the most rigorous approaches to evaluation were found to have the largest effects. And I think sometimes the looser the data we have, the looser, less rigorous the approach, the more risk we're taking is going to underestimate the impacts of our programs. The National Head Start Impact Study is a very big deal. It's 40-something years later, we finally have a national randomized trial of Head Start. And it's not good news. The basic bottom line from this study is no lasting effects at kindergarten and first grade. Now, I think there's a little bit there in terms of kids in the control group went to other programs, lots of them. And so it's not Head Start versus nothing. And so if you're thinking about what's the impact of Head Start compared to nothing, it probably underestimates the effects of Head Start. But I also think we have to look at what happened when kids, one of the exciting things about this is it tells us what happened to these kids who went to Head Start and who were Head Start eligible and didn't go when they got to kindergarten. Learning accelerated dramatically. The story that's out there in the media that the public schools these kids go to are terrible and do awful things to them, well, that may be true some places, but by and large, learning shot up like a rocket for the kids who went to Head Start and the kids who didn't when they got to kindergarten. And one of the reasons that there is no lasting effect at kindergarten and at the end of kindergarten and in the first grade is that public schools actually help the control kids catch up to the kids who went to Head Start. Initial effects are much smaller than for good state pre-K programs, and I'm going to get into that in more detail. They're half or less what good state pre-K programs are doing in the average Head Start. And remember, that's the average Head Start. That doesn't mean there aren't Head Start programs that are doing much better than average. Right? That also means that there are Head Start programs that are doing worse than average, too. And I think one of the things that we need to focus on is 40-some-odd years down the road, Head Start teachers are still paid about half what public school teachers are paid. And I really think that continues to be a source of the bad news that I talked about here in the impact study. Now, if we look at typical child care programs, sad to say, the story is even worse. That is, as disappointing as the Head Start results were, they're way better than for typical child care. Right? So, at best, we see very small positive effects of child care, and we actually see some negative effects of typical child care. They're small, but given what I showed you at the beginning, we could close 90% of the achievement gap, and what are we getting? Very small positive or very small negative effects. We're not getting anything like what we could out of these programs. Centers have small positive effects on cognitive development, and best guess is small negative effects on social development. Again, in comparison with Head Start, there's never any suggestion that Head Start has. You can argue about how big the positive effects are, but they're always positive. Right? So if we were thinking Head Start versus typical child care, every one of those kids would be better off in something that was more like Head Start. Initial, as I said, initial effects are smaller than Head Start. Again, if we want to know what other, why would we get these kinds of results? I don't think it's hard to see. We look at teachers are poorly paid and they are otherwise weakly supported. That not only aren't they paid well, not only aren't they compensated well for what they do, there's very little support for them in their jobs. Now, to put this in perspective, the High Scope Perry Preschool study closed 75% of the achievement gap in general cognitive ability, which is the toughest place to do this, with 1 year. I don't have math or print awareness, which are very simple literacy skill measures, for Perry, but I wanted to put that down as a marker. It's a very intensive, very expensive program. Been a very rigorous study of universal preschool in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Oklahoma is really the only state that provides quality preschool to every 4-year-old who wants it. So we don't have that general cognitive measure, but we do have measures on math, on broad domain, and on simple literacy skills like print awareness, a relatively narrow domain, easy to teach. Catherine Snow, one of the nation's leading experts on literacy, says, look, it's only 26 letters, it's not that hard. It's not like language. How many words are there? Way more than 26. But so if we look at this, the Tulsa program is causing 30% of the gap on math, virtually 100% of the gap on simple literacy skills. We did the same kind of study of 8 higher quality state pre-K programs. This is not all state pre-K programs. Some state pre-K programs are not very good at all. They're all over the place. These are 8 higher quality programs. Closing about 1/4 of the achievement gap on cognitive ability, about the same for math as in Tulsa, a little over 30%. 80% print awareness. If we compare these to Head Start, and I've got 2 estimates there because I'm giving you one that basically says, well, one for 4-year-olds, one for 3-year-olds. Unfortunately, the way the study's done, you can't say, so what's the impact of having it at 3 and 4? But you can see they're not in the ballpark of what better state pre-K programs are doing. This is why Congress has ordered the program to make some substantial improvements. And those are coming down the line. This is why the Obama administration proposed the most radical changes in the program in over 40 years in terms of accountability and what they expect the program to look like in the future. Because there isn't any reason that Head Start can't be doing just as well as state pre-K programs. There absolutely none. Just because it's Head Start, there's nothing about the program that prevents it. Well, there maybe are some things in terms of, I would like them to have, Head Start to have 25 pages of regs that programs have to meet instead of something the size of the Manhattan phone book. And if teachers could focus on teaching in the classroom rather than filling out paperwork, that might go a long way. I'm hoping that's part of what happens with the administration's new proposals on Head Start. Now, much of what that research, many of these programs, state pre-K as well as Head Start, are focused on disadvantaged kids. It has been, it's been federal policy and for most states policy to focus on disadvantaged kids. I think conceptually that's right. I think practically it's wrong. The reasons for that are that when we do this, so what do you mean by disadvantage? Well, we say kids have to be poor or below a certain income cutoff. Well, fortunately for kids, there are relatively few for whom that's a permanent status. This is something that changes year to year, month to month for many families. Right? We all know that in the child care world, where many programs re-establish eligibility monthly in this country, there's that much change in who meets the eligibility requirements. Well, what that means is that at any given point in time, you identify these are the poor kids, that's who we're going to serve. 6 months later, 12 months later, you've missed a lot of the poor kids because they weren't poor when you did the eligibility, but they were poor later. Are they any less disadvantaged? No. So we end up missing 3/4 of the disadvantaged kids, 3/4 of the kids in poverty by taking this approach. It's also the case that most school failure is not kids below the poverty line. School failure is, you're much more at risk of it if you're below the poverty line, but lots of school failure, most school failure, in fact more than half, is kids who are not poor. Most of the kids who drop out in this country are not poor. Most of the kids who fail a grade and are held back are not poor. So if we just focus on kids below the poverty line, we miss most of the school failure problem. Disadvantaged kids do gain more from preschool programs, but non-disadvantaged kids gain more than most people think. Peer effects can be substantial, so if we just serve the poor kids over here, they'll have the opportunity to learn from the kids who aren't poor. If we had programs, right, the programs who do the best job covering poor kids are universal programs. They have better coverage of poor children than programs that are focused just on poor kids. Is this going to be more expensive? Absolutely. But as an economist, I do the calculations, and they tell me the benefits are sufficiently bigger from programs for all kids that they're better economic investment than ones that are just targeted on disadvantaged kids. I just want to show you some data. These are from New Jersey and Oklahoma. They're raw score changes in different kinds of scores, so they're not really comparable to the effect sizes. But to give you some sense, in New Jersey we're working in 31 low-income communities. Right? So most people in the communities are low, 40% of them at least qualify for free or reduced lunch. But lots of the kids are not low income. If we look at the differences in effects on, we say, well, what's your effect on general cognitive ability? 5.6 points for the high income, 5.5 points for the low income, math, 0.8 versus 0.8. The front awareness is a little bigger advantage for the low income kids. Really not a lot of difference. If we look at Oklahoma, we see somewhat more difference in terms of larger effects for low income, because that's for the whole state and not just for kids who live in low-income communities, which is what the New Jersey data is from. So there's not so much range in the New Jersey data. But the effects for high-income kids are not small. And when I say high-income, I just mean they don't qualify for free and reduced lunch. It doesn't mean that they're wealthy. Right? We're talking about most working and middle-income families are in that category. Now, I want to delve a little more into the Tulsa data, because one of the things that Oklahoma does is give us a kind of natural experiment about what could Head Start do. How might it really compare apples to apples with a high-quality state pre-K program? Because in Oklahoma, Head Start participates in the state pre-K program. Head Start teachers get the same pay, same working conditions. So the teachers are comparable. The curriculum's, to a great extent, comparable. And so what do we see on math? TPS, Tulsa Public Schools, and Tulsa Head Start, THS, are virtually identical. And producing way bigger effects, closing almost 40% of the achievement gap at kindergarten entry, compared to Head Start, which maybe gets 20% of the achievement gap. Right, so at least twice as big. What's the difference between Head Start in Tulsa and Head Start nationally? The kids aren't any different. The biggest difference is the qualifications and pay of the teachers. It has to meet all the same performance standards. It gets the same money except in terms of teacher salaries. Then if we look at letter word identification, simple literacy skill, spelling, it's really not spelling, it's kind of the things that underlie kids' spelling. The effects of Tulsa Head Start are smaller. Well, I can suggest two reasons that might, by the way, they're still way bigger, right, than Head Start nationally. Why are they smaller? Well, maybe because Head Start is only for poor kids, and Tulsa Public Schools serves everybody, and the kids are learning language and literacy skills from each other, and not just from the teachers. And it's possible that the connection with the public schools being stronger, that there's a greater focus on the literacy skills that are going to help kids succeed in kindergarten. We don't know which of those is true, but both of them are possible. Now, there's a lot of debate, as you all, I'm sure, know, in the early childhood field about is this BA degree really important? Does it matter? There's a big study in child development that was published, and the author said there is no clear pattern of association between degree or major and program quality or child outcomes. Well, I looked at the data that was in their article, and I said, so how many effects did they estimate across all these studies they looked at? 27. How many of those were positive for BA? 19. What are the chances that that would happen just at random? Less than 3%. I said, well, let's just focus on child outcomes. You looked at 20 different comparisons on child outcomes. How many of those were positive for BAs? Did BAs have a larger effect than teachers who did? 16 out of 20. Right? What are the chances that happened at random? Less than 2%. Right? 99 times out of 100, pretty much. That's not an accident. Well, that suggests to me they have maybe not drawn the right conclusion from the data. And one of the reasons I think that's true is because we did another meta-analysis. We looked at the effect sizes in programs where teachers had a BA, effect sizes in programs where teachers didn't have a BA. And the thick line here, right, that's the average effect. And they're really not very different. And I think that's kind of what people are seeing out there. But if we ask a different question, what are the programs that produce really big effects for kids? And we look at the whole distribution, not just the average. What do those look like? That's what the box and whiskers show you. Technical term, box, whiskers. These are the really big effects. They don't occur over here where the teachers don't have BA degrees. And so if we're interested in producing really, really big effects for kids, I think we have to think about, if we don't have high qualifications and adequate pay for teachers, what are our chances of producing really big effects? And that slide suggests our chances are pretty close to 0. Now there's still some pretty decent size effects without that. And we actually did a study of California's state pre-K program where teachers are only required to have 2-year degrees. And they have pretty big effects for kids. Way bigger than Head Start, on average, in state pre-K program. But they have very high quality teacher preparation programs for teachers with AA degrees. And the vast majority of those teachers don't stop at an AA. So at any given time, the preschool teacher pool is probably 60% teachers with AA degrees, 40% with a higher degree. But those teachers with AA are moving on. And I think that's very different than when we create dead-end jobs for teachers, where they're just stopping there. And it's very different if we have a system that has essentially the same teacher preparation for AA teachers and BA teachers. And that's not true everywhere. Now, it's not just what you have when you come in. Everybody who's been around for a while understands that most of what you learn about doing your job, you learn after you have your job. And so we've done the same kind of analysis on the in-service training. It's very important. We're getting very large effect sizes, very large effects of in-service training on knowledge, attitude, and skill, and on children's learning. We also find you get the best effects when you have a fixed, clear curriculum. You're doing it on a small scale. And your measures of what you're looking for are very tightly aligned with your in-service training. The other way of looking at that is the kinds of outcomes that you're trying to get. That ought to drive the content of your in-service training. If it's not tightly tied to that, you're not going to get the kinds of results this suggests. But we had to ask a question, if it's just about in-service training and it's really that easy, why isn't everybody getting great results? And I think the answer is it's not just about in-service training. I wanted to provide one example of a kind of bigger picture of quality. These are the data from the Chicago Child Parent Centers. These were run by the Chicago Public Schools. I tell everybody, hey, if the Chicago Public Schools could do this, this is not, I'm not talking pie in the sky, out of reach someplace. And I'm not knocking, look, the chief officer for preschool in the Chicago Public Schools is Barbara Bowman. So you're not going to find somebody better on the planet to run your preschool program. She wasn't running it when they did this, but they probably, this suggests that they put good people in charge of this program. General cognitive ability, you're looking at closing 60%, upwards of 80% of the achievement gap with this in 2 years. Mathematics, now that measure is not comparable to the one I presented earlier. That's just an easier test. But math, reading, you're looking at closing substantial amounts of the achievement gap. And if we look at second grade, remember Head Start's not gap effects here in second grade. This is very different. Cutting grade retention by 6 percentage points with 1 year, 11 percentage points with 2 years. I've compared these results to the results from our high-quality preschool program in New Jersey at second grade. They're virtually identical. What do our programs have in common? Highly qualified, all the teachers have a BA certification in early childhood. They're paid like public school teachers. They have strong supervision, strong accountability systems, strong support systems. So here are the data from New Jersey, right? Gains in language literacy and math. That Chicago study was decades ago. This is right now. 2 years have twice the effect of 1 year. So this, I understand politically why we focus on 4-year-olds, but as Marquita said, that they don't just come as 4-year-olds, they were 3 and 2 and 2 years have twice the effect of 1 year. The effects are sustained through second grade, and these effect sizes are almost exactly the same as we saw from the same kind of program. They had 16 kids in a classroom in the Chicago Child Parent Centers. We got 15. Grade repetition was 10% at the end of grade 1 if you didn't go to preschool, 7.5% if you had 1 year, 5% if you had 2 years. 2 years of preschool cut school failure in half. So what does this mean? We need not high-quality preschool programs. We need very high-quality preschool programs. Well-educated, adequately paid teachers, good curriculum and professional development, intensive education, small classes, low ratios, a lot of one-on-one attention for kids, continuous attendance over an extended period of time, not bouncing kids in and out. And if we don't have adequate capacity, even if we don't intend to bounce kids out, poor kids move. Yeah. They move a lot. So they move from one neighborhood to another, and you say, sorry, we're all filled up. You can't go to preschool. We wouldn't say, sorry, we're all filled up. You can't go to kindergarten. And we need a continuous improvement process that includes measures of children's progress. Quality rating system gets us some way down the road, but I don't think it gets us nearly far enough. We need to be looking not just at process measures, we need to be looking at outcomes for kids. As I've said, targeting is an important issue, and I think it takes us down the wrong road. The less targeted we can be, the more successful we're going to be in reaching the disadvantaged kids that we're trying to reach with targeted programs. We're also going to reach many children. We're going to reach many children who will have problems with school, who are not ready who aren't poor. And then I think there is this issue of peer effect, as I suggested with the Tulsa data, right? That if we just have poor kids off by themselves, they can't take advantage of the learning opportunities with more advantaged peers. So in conclusion, most preschool programs are not delivering the promised results. That's the bad news. But if we look out there, it's not that they're all the same. Some programs are much more effective than others. We can learn from these more effective programs about what works. Quality matters most at what's considered by the field very high levels. I think we need to recalibrate. What we've been calling high quality is too often just mediocre. We need to raise our standards for what we expect in terms of high quality. We need to focus intensively on educating children rather than on other goals that are indirect paths to educating kids. We need to educate all children. Targeted programs are not reaching their targets. Head Start, after more than 40 years, does not reach most poor kids. By spring of the year, most kids in Head Start are not poor. That's the problem with trying to shoot at a moving target. And it's a good thing, as I said, the target moves. Kids shouldn't have to, we don't want kids consistently poor. But it means we need to rethink how we reach the most disadvantaged populations. And finally, we need to document what works and what doesn't with data and use that to improve our programs. Thank you.